Clara always prioritized ethics above all, but Edward, the father of the most rebellious student in the class, changed everything. The tension between them erupted into forbidden encounters, until a camera captured more than it should have. Clara was a dedicated and respected teacher at her school. Always focused on teaching and inspiring her students, she maintained a firm and ethical stance, avoiding any kind of personal involvement with students' families. Her life was peaceful until Edward, the father of the most problematic student in the class, came into the picture. With irresistible charm and a captivating smile, he quickly became the center of attention. At first, Clara saw Edward only as a concerned father worried about his son's performance, Ethan. He often appeared at school to discuss the boy's rebellious behavior. However, as the meetings became more frequent, Clara began to notice the chemistry between them. Edward was charismatic and had a way of making her feel special. Their conversations were laden with tension and meaningful glances. One afternoon, after a tense meeting about Ethan, Edward invited Clara out for coffee. She hesitated, knowing this could cross a line that should never be crossed. But the curiosity and attraction were irresistible. By accepting his invitation, Clara had no idea that meeting would change everything. At the cafe, the conversation flowed naturally. They laughed and shared personal stories. Clara felt at ease like never before. Edward praised her work and the way she handled difficult students. With every word he spoke, Clara's heart raced. The casual touch of their hands as he passed the sugar sent a shiver down her spine. After that meeting, the tension between them only grew. Clara tried to ignore her feelings but couldn't avoid thinking about Edward while preparing her lesson. He was a devoted and caring father, which made everything even more complicated. She knew she should keep her distance, but the attraction was overwhelming. Weeks passed, and their meetings became more frequent under the pretense of discussing Ethan's progress. Each time they were together, the chemistry intensified. Furtive glances and knowing smiles became common. Clara was torn between her duty as a teacher and her feelings for Edward. The fateful day came when Clara decided to invite Edward to watch a school performance in the evening. He accepted enthusiastically, and the atmosphere between them was electrifying. After the performance, as they walked down the empty school hallway, Edward stopped and looked into her eyes. "Clara," he began softly, "I can't stop thinking about you." His words were like an electric shock. Clara felt her heart race as he slowly moved closer. Before she could react, Edward pulled her close and kissed her gently. The kiss was intense and unexpected. Clara felt as though she were floating. The moment was brief but overwhelming. Shortly after that heated kiss, they heard footsteps approaching. Someone was coming. In a sudden panic, Clara pushed Edward away and ran out of the school before anyone could see them together. The adrenaline from the betrayal became addictive. Every furtive encounter with Edward was more intense than the last. They began meeting regularly in discreet places, always fearful of being discovered. The tension between them grew as the lies piled up. Clara knew she was risking everything for an uncontrollable desire. However, moments of guilt loomed like a shadow over her, especially when she thought about the innocent devotion of Charlie. Over time, the lies began to accumulate like a storm ready to explode. Charlie started noticing changes in Clara's behavior. She was more distant and often distracted during conversations. One fateful day, Charlie decided to come home early from work due to an unforeseen issue at the office. He entered the house only to hear laughter coming from the bathroom, laughter that wasn't his. His heart sank as he realized something was very wrong. He approached the bathroom door and listened to familiar voices, the voices of the workers he had treated as friends during the entire renovation. Charlie couldn't contain his anger and pain as he abruptly opened the bathroom door. The scene before him was devastating. Clara was in Edward's arms while Ethan watched with a satisfied smile on his face. The expression on Charlie's face was one of absolute shock. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Anna, how could you?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty house. Anna froze for a moment before the gravity of the situation hit her. She realized she had not only betrayed her husband but also her own moral character. The confrontation was explosive. Harsh words were exchanged between the three lovers and Charlie as he tried to comprehend how this had all happened right under his nose. Anna attempted to justify her actions, saying that Charlie didn't give her enough attention or affection, but her words rang hollow in the face of the visible pain in his eyes. Charlie left the house in tears, while Anna fully grasped the weight of her mistake, not just for betraying her innocent husband but also for destroying everything they had built together over the years. The following days were dark for everyone involved in the betrayal. Charlie decided to distance himself temporarily to reflect on their relationship, while Anna was left alone to grapple with her poor choices. Ethan and Tyler left after that fateful day. They knew they could no longer stay without causing more pain to the already shattered family. Anna learned the hard way about the consequences of her actions. Her search for excitement had led to the destruction of the true love she shared with Charlie. And so ended a story marked by betrayal in the shadows of a renovation, a bitter lesson about lost loyalty and questionable character. In the months that followed, Anna faced a deep emptiness in her life without Charlie by her side. She tried to move on with her daily routine, but every corner of the house reminded her of the happy memories they had shared before the betrayal was uncovered. The newly renovated walls now felt like silent witnesses to her personal downfall. Charlie sought support from friends and family during this painful time. He needed to understand how he had failed to notice the warning signs before Anna's betrayal became a devastating reality in their lives. Deep conversations with friends brought him some solace. Though deeply wounded, he knew he needed to find the strength within himself to move forward. Meanwhile, Anna wrestled with feelings of regret and loneliness. She tried to justify her actions to herself, mentally repeating the reasons she had betrayed Charlie, his lack of attention, difficult moments in their relationship, but these justifications felt inadequate under the weight of the guilt she carried. One evening, as she gazed out the window of the renovated living room where so much laughter had once echoed before the betrayal came to light, Anna decided to write a letter to Charlie. It was her final attempt to express her feelings and ask for forgiveness for the pain she had caused. In the letter, she confessed her weaknesses and acknowledged how deeply she had hurt someone who had always been good to her. She wrote about how she missed him every day and wished she could turn back time to fix her mistakes. With tears in her eyes, Anna sealed the letter and decided to deliver it personally to the house where Charlie was temporarily staying with a close friend. When she arrived, her heart raced at the sight of the man she still loved sitting on the couch, staring out the window, lost in thought. Charlie looked up, surprised to see her standing at the door. His expression was a mix of emotions, surprise, pain, and perhaps even a faint glimmer of hope behind the deep sadness reflected in his tired face. "Charlie," Anna began hesitantly, stepping slowly toward him. "I just wanted to." He raised his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "I'm not sure I'm ready to hear this right now." His voice trembled with emotions he had held back for so long. "Please," she pleaded, "just hear me out." Charlie hesitated for a moment before slowly nodding. He needed to know what she had to say, even though he knew how painful it would be to relive those difficult moments once again. Anna handed him the letter, her hands trembling slightly as Charlie looked deeply into her eyes, searching for answers in the handwritten words filled with such raw emotional desperation. After a few silent minutes, he read every carefully chosen word of her letter, brimming with sincere regret for her past actions. Something within him began to soften, despite the still persistent ache in his wounded heart. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Charlie finally said, breaking the heavy silence between them, "but I appreciate you coming here today." The words felt like a release for both of them. While they knew nothing would return to normal immediately, there was perhaps a glimmer of hope for them to find some semblance of peace after the emotional chaos they had endured together in the past few months since the devastating betrayal came to light. But that hope quickly faded as the days passed without any meaningful changes between them. Each encounter was marked by awkward silences, with frustrated attempts at conversations that only ended up suffocated by the weight of unspoken emotion. Charlie began to avoid frequent meetings with Anna. He needed to process everything on his own without being constantly reminded of the open wounds caused by her betrayal, wounds that seemed to heal far too slowly, or perhaps not at all. Meanwhile, Anna remained trapped in her own torturous thoughts, trying to understand how she had reached such a dark point in her life. Surrounded by memories of happier times shared with the man she loved, now transformed into distant echoes filled only with unbearable emotional pain. She often walked through the renovated house, recalling the plans they had made together before their personal tragedy unfolded. Those plans now felt as distant as the stars shining in the night sky, impossible to reach or revive again. Nights were particularly hard for them both. While Charlie struggled with deep insomnia filled with nightmares of imagined betrayals or painful memories of the love he had once shared with Anna, she spent sleepless hours reflecting on her poor choices and the anguished loneliness they had brought her. They were both trapped in vicious cycles fueled by the mutual pain caused by the betrayal, unable to move forward completely or find new paths without constantly looking back at the shadows of their past. And so, their lives continued separately yet inexplicably connected by invisible threads formed from the experiences they had once shared. Those experiences were now bitter memories laden with the tragic consequences of impulsive decisions made without considering the future repercussion. Meanwhile, renovations on the house continued with new workers, bringing fresh energy to the space once marred by betrayal. The new colors on the walls stood in stark contrast to the lingering old memories etched into the very structure of what had once been a happy home, now turned into an emotional minefield where any step could trigger devastating internal explosion. Life carried on, indifferent to the personal pains both of them faced. New days dawned, bringing empty promises with no real guarantees of healing or reconciliation for these two lost souls caught in the fog of their past. And so, they continued their separate journeys through the shadows left by betrayal, without happy endings or traditional closure, just vague accounts of what had happened, marked by the deep scars left on the broken hearts of two human beings trying to make sense of the emotional confusion caused by wrong choices made in fleeting moments of impulse. The weeks passed slowly after that pivotal meeting at the house where everything began to fall apart for Claire and Charlie. Silence hung heavily in the air. Every corner seemed to echo memories of the happy moments they had shared before the betrayal was uncovered. Meanwhile, Claire tried to rebuild her life after losing not only the love of her husband but also her identity as a respected teacher at the school where she had worked so diligently for years. She decided to seek professional help to cope with the tumultuous feelings inside her. Deep guilt mingled with constant regret had become unwelcome companions during lonely, sleepless nights spent reflecting on choices made without considering future consequences. Therapy sessions proved essential in her internal journey. Little by little, she began to confront her deepest fears related to emotional intimacy and the societal expectations placed on women in the modern world. Meanwhile, Charlie sought refuge in excessive work, trying to forget the painful memories associated with the house where so many promises had been made. Overtime hours became an effective way to escape the harsh reality he faced daily, reminded of the happy moments he had once shared with the woman he loved, now distant. But even working tirelessly every day, he still missed her. Every shared laugh, every knowing glance, every gentle touch. It all felt so distant now. The nights were particularly difficult when he came home exhausted after long hours at the office. He often found himself sitting alone on the couch, staring blankly at the empty walls that bore only the shadows of the past. One day, while reviewing important documents, Charlie received an unexpected message from an unknown number. The message read simply, "I'm thinking about you." His heart raced instantly. Could it be Claire trying to reach out again? He hesitated before deciding to respond but quickly realized he needed to understand the intent behind the message before opening the door to old pain again. "Who is this?" he asked cautiously, typing quickly on his phone. After a few agonizing minutes, the reply came, "It's me, Claire." His heart sank as he read the words. He knew he should ignore her, but something inside him yearned for answers, explanations, any sign that there might still be a real possibility of rebuilding what they had once shared. "Please meet me tomorrow at 5 at the cafe near the school," she said. Charlie hesitated again. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face this situation again, but he couldn't resist the idea of her wanting to talk in person after all this time apart. The next morning, Charlie woke up anxious, anticipation mingled with fear. He knew this conversation could change everything again, or make things even worse between them. When he arrived at the cafe, he found Claire already waiting at a secluded table in the corner. She seemed nervous, but there was something different about her. Perhaps it was the sparkle in her eyes or simply a new determination radiating from her. Charlie took a deep breath and approached her, uncertain about what would come next but unable to walk away from the possibility of closure, or perhaps a new beginning. "Hi," she said softly as he approached. "Hi," he replied cautiously, sitting across from the woman whose presence still stirred so many conflicting emotions within him. Claire took a deep breath before starting. "I know I hurt you deeply, and I want to sincerely apologize for everything." Her words came out trembling but carried genuine weight. Charlie could feel how difficult it was for her to open up like this after all this time apart. "I just want to understand why you did it," he said, finally breaking the tense silence between them. "I got carried away by emotions. I felt lonely even while being married, and it never should have happened," Claire replied, looking directly into his eyes, searching for some trace of the connection they had once shared. The conversation slowly began to flow. They discussed the mistakes that were made, the insecurities they faced during that complicated period when everything seemed to be falling apart around them. But they also reminisced about the good times they had shared before the tragedy unfolded. Charlie then realized something important. Despite the open wounds, there was still love, true love that might even be strong enough to overcome the challenges they had faced. But could they truly rebuild everything? The doubt lingered in the air as they both tried to find answers within themselves. After hours of talking, they decided to take a step forward. They promised to work together to heal the deep wounds caused by the betrayal. It was just the beginning of a new phase in their lives, filled with challenges but also brimming with opportunities to rediscover who they were, both individually and together. In the months that followed, Claire returned to the classroom. She knew she needed to rebuild not only her career but also the love she and Charlie were trying to restore. Each day brought new challenges, both at school and at home, but they were determined to face them together this time. And so, they embarked on a journey filled with ups and downs but brimming with renewed hope for both of them. The ongoing struggle to keep the flame alive despite the emotional storms they had weathered became their shared purpose. After all, true love can indeed overcome the barriers of the past, as long as you believe in it above all else.